Has someone approached you on social media or even on a dating website and told you about a great investment that you can't go wrong, and over time the value of your investment perhaps has increased substantially, and it's a crypto website, a crypto exchange where you continue to trade and your income and gains continue to go up. But when you try to take your money off the exchange, you are asked to pay more, maybe in taxes, maybe in fees, or for other reasons. And every time, despite what you try to do, you can't actually get your crypto off of the exchange. Perhaps you were asked initially to buy crypto on one exchange like Coinbase and then transfer to this other exchange, and it looks like a valid exchange. Well, you might unfortunately be the victim of a pig slaughter scam. And pig slaughter scams have been affecting many, many people in the US. And by some estimates, billions of dollars have been lost as a result. If you think you might have been a victim of one of these scams, it may make sense to file a police report and speak to other investigative agencies, as well as hire an attorney for an investigation. But in this video today, I'm going to talk about some potential light at the end of the tunnel, and that's through tax deductions. Because although you've lost this money, and in many situations, unfortunately, it's just not coming back, that if you can take a tax deduction, at least we can save something, right? If we can at least save on taxes, that's something. But it's unfortunately not as clear-cut as you might have hoped. And so in this video, I'm going to go through some of the options that are available, some of the potential pitfalls with each of them, and what you should do if you are in this situation. So to begin, several years ago, it was a lot easier to take deductions when you had a loss, be it through a theft or what's known as a casualty loss. And that's because there was an itemized deduction that's available for any individual who files a tax return and itemizes their deductions. But after 2018, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act reduced the application of the casualty or theft losses to only those that occurred in federally declared disaster zones. And unless you've lost your crypto amidst a hurricane or a tornado, it's very unlikely that you'll qualify. And so if you were the victim of a pig slaughter scam, the conventional or the easiest to apply deduction of a theft deduction likely doesn't apply. However, there are still some other options that might apply and that we often look into for our clients. And one of those is that you can still claim a casualty or theft loss if it was a transaction entered into for profit under 165(c)(2). And as long as it meets the definition of this type of transaction, then you can still claim a deduction much the same way that you would have been previously able to under the Tax Cuts and before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. However, there is still some debate as to whether or not a crypto investment itself is eligible for this type of deduction. There hasn't been any cases yet in tax court or otherwise applying crypto scams to a for-profit investment loss. And so without that precedent, it's hard to say that it's a sure thing, but there is certainly a strong argument that it should be applied. Another option that we sometimes look into is a Ponzi theft deduction. And so the Ponzi deduction has a safe harbor that the IRS released a few years ago after the Madoff and other Ponzi losses that made it easier for taxpayers to claim a certain percentage of the loss. Because at the end of the day, it's very important to know that if you claim a loss and you later do have a recovery, you'll have a taxable event later on, especially if you claimed more of a loss than what you actually lost. If you claimed that you lost everything and then you get something back, well then that something you get back is typically taxable and usually treated as income, which is very unfavorable. So you want to be sure that it's actually lost. And so with any of these deductions, but applying it to the Ponzi deduction, the safe harbor allows you to take 75 or 90% of the loss in the year that it was discovered. And so you'll want to make sure that there is no likelihood of recovery, or certainly not more than 25% if you're going to take the safe harbor. But with the Ponzi deduction too, it's hard to know if the rules that apply to Ponzi type losses will fit a pig slaughter type scheme. Because the pig slaughters, they typically have an individual who reaches out to you that tries to get you to invest on these exchanges. It doesn't exactly fit Ponzi, but in some ways it does, right? Because you're adding more money in thinking that you're getting more, and then you're maybe adding more and more, right? Doesn't fit exactly, but arguments could be made. So Ponzi deduction is another option that I see out there. The third is potentially taking it as a capital loss. Typically in these types of schemes, you'll buy cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or Ethereum on an exchange like Coinbase, and then you'll transfer it to these fake exchanges. And so when you transfer it there, an argument could possibly be that it is transferred for nothing in return, therefore generating a capital loss. Now, the first two types of deductions, the Ponzi and the for-profit business transaction, those are typically itemized deductions. And as long as you itemize and you're under certain thresholds, you can take a pretty direct deduction against your income. Capital loss in this third example, however, capital losses can only offset capital gains in the current year, up to an unlimited amount of capital gains. But if there are no capital gains or they've all been applied against the loss, then up to $3,000 of income per year. And so if you've got a lot of income and very little or no capital gains, this doesn't do a whole lot of good for you. And so the first two types of deductions are much more beneficial in situations where there's sizable amounts of income. In all of these scenarios, there is no explicit guidance. There is no clarity from tax courts or appellate courts. And so what any practitioner tells you at the end of the day is just their opinion. And it might be an opinion based on facts or application of other cases that are similar, but they're still opinions. And so I would suggest that if you do have a sizable loss from a pig slaughter scheme, to not just talk to a tax professional on a phone call or get the advice on TikTok, but get an actual opinion letter. Opinion letters provide a lot of value, especially if you are audited in the future and the IRS disagrees with the position. They disagree that the Ponzi or the 165C2 or the capital loss applies. And if they disagree, that could result in substantial tax and even penalties, or even worse. The value of an opinion letter is that you've got the written advice of a tax professional, and opinion letters need to conform with certain standards. So they're typically quite lengthy. They include facts, analysis of the law, and ultimately an opinion of the professional on whether or not they think it's more likely or not that the IRS would uphold a position based on your facts in the law. So when exploring these different deductions, especially if it's a sizable amount, if we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, $1 million of losses, you certainly should consider getting an opinion letter, because the amount of penalties that can accrue if the IRS disagrees is substantial. But an opinion letter will generally provide protection against penalties if properly drafted and relied upon. So at the end of the day, the pig slaughter scams that are going on, they're horrendous. It's very unfortunate what's going on, and that there seems to be very little ways to prevent against it, because many of them are occurring overseas. And so in the absence of Congress stepping in or someone stepping in to stop these things, at least there can be some deductions that might be available based on your situation. So talk to a tax professional, see if there is some light at the end of the tunnel for you, and if a tax deduction might fit. If you benefited from this video, please like and share it with a friend. Thanks.